"Let's make it harder tonight," the rancher said. The giant mail-order bride whispered, "I can't take this anymore." "Let's make it harder tonight," the rancher said. Garrett Dalton didn't look at his wife when he spoke those words. He stared at his clenched fists on the kitchen table, fists that had killed men in the war, buried a wife and infant son, and built an empire from dust, now trembling like a frightened boy's. The rancher's jaw worked silently, grinding words he'd never learned to say, and when he finally lifted his eyes to Nora, they held something she'd never seen before, pure, raw terror. Not of raiders, not of drought or debt, terror of her. Terror of what loving her completely might cost him. "I can't take this anymore," the giant mail-order bride whispered. Nora Brennan's hands moved to the buttons of her dress. Slowly, deliberately, her fingers steady even as her breath came in ragged gasps. The giant mail-order bride stood 5'10", of barely contained fury and heartbreak, and she'd just made a decision that would either save them or destroy them both. She didn't drop her gaze, didn't flinch. The rancher had given her 3 months of his body, but kept his heart locked behind walls of grief and guilt. And tonight, one of them was going to break. "You want harder, Garrett?" Her voice cut like winter wind. "Then watch me leave. Watch me walk out that door, because staying in this half-marriage is killing something inside me I'll never get back." A single tear traced down her cheek, but her chin lifted. "You think grief is hard? Try loving someone who won't let you love them. Try being touched like you're precious in the dark, then treated like hired help in the daylight." The rancher's chair scraped back. He stood, all 6'3" of damaged, desperate man, and the distance between them crackled with 3 months of unspoken longing and barely leashed need. Outside, thunder rolled across the Wyoming darkness. Inside, the oil lamp flickered, casting shadows that danced across Garrett's weathered face. "You want to know what harder means?" Garrett's voice dropped to something dangerous, something broken. "It means I stop protecting you from the man I really am. It means I stop holding back because I'm terrified that if I love you the way I need to love you, God will take you too." His voice cracked. "It means I finally let you see why my first wife looked at me with fear in her eyes before she died." The giant mail-order bride went perfectly still. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the storm gathering strength outside their isolated ranch house. For 3 months, Nora had wondered why her husband pulled away every time they got close. Why he made love to her like a drowning man gasping for air, then barely spoke to her at breakfast. Why he looked at her sometimes with such hunger it made her skin burn, then disappeared to that grave on the hillside for hours. "What did you just say?" Her voice barely made sound. The rancher took 1 step toward her, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, and the look on his face, shame and desire and something wild breaking free, made her heart slam against her ribs. This wasn't the careful, controlled man who rationed his words and his touch. This was something else entirely, something that had been caged for 9 years, and the lock was finally breaking. "You want the truth that makes it harder?" Garrett stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see his chest heaving, see the pulse hammering in his neck, smell the leather and hay and sweat that clung to his skin. "Sarah was afraid of me, of my needs, of how much I wanted her." His hands opened and closed at his sides. "I tried to be gentle, tried to be what she needed, but I wasn't gentle enough. I got her pregnant when her body was too weak. Demanded she come on that cattle drive when she should have stayed home. And she died looking at me like I was a monster." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nora's breath caught in her throat. She'd known about Sarah, the delicate first wife who died of cholera, along with their infant son. But she hadn't known this, hadn't known the rancher blamed himself not just for bad timing, but for something darker. "I killed her with my selfishness, Nora." Garrett's voice broke. "Killed my own son before he ever had a chance to live. And then you arrived, strong and fierce, and everything she wasn't. And I thought I could keep you at arm's length. Thought I could take what I needed without giving you all of me." His eyes glistened in the lamplight. "Because if I give you everything, if I love you the way this thing inside me is screaming to love you, I'll destroy you too." The giant mail-order bride felt something shift inside her chest. For 3 months, she'd thought the rancher was rejecting her, thought she wasn't good enough, wasn't feminine enough, wasn't Sarah, but now she understood. Garrett wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting her, from him, from the intensity of whatever he'd been holding back. So that's it. Anger flared hot in Nora's voice, burning through the hurt. You've decided I'm too fragile to handle the real you? You've decided for both of us that I can't take what you need to give. She took a step toward him, and the rancher's eyes widened. I'm not her, Garrett. I'm not delicate Sarah who needed protecting. I know, do you? Another step. The floorboards creaked beneath her weight. Because you treat me like I am. You touch me like I might shatter. You hold back like I'm made of glass. Her voice rose. I can birth calves with my bare hands. I can shoot raiders. I can work this ranch as hard as any man you've got. She was close enough now to feel the heat radiating from his body. You want to know what I can't take? This you needing me for everything except your heart. That's what's breaking me, Garrett. Not your strength. Not your needs. Your fear. The rancher's jaw clenched. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or terror, or both tangled together. The storm outside was getting closer. Wind rattled the windows. The lamp flame jumped and steadied. Rain began to hit the roof in fat, heavy drops that sounded like drum beats. You don't know what you're asking for, Garrett said. But his voice had changed. Rougher, deeper, like something was waking up inside him after a long, cold sleep. His hands twitched at his sides, as if he wanted to reach for her, but didn't trust himself to touch. Then show me. Nora's hands went back to her dress buttons. One popped free. Then another. The fabric parted, revealing the white cotton chemise beneath. But this wasn't about seduction. This was about truth. About finally tearing down the last walls between them. You said let's make it harder tonight. So make it harder, Garrett. Stop hiding. Stop protecting me from whatever you think I can't handle. Her green eyes blazed in the lamplight. Because I'm done with safe. I'm done with careful. If I'm going to be your wife, then be my husband. All of you, even the parts you think are too dark or too much or too broken. The giant mail-order bride let her dress fall open, and Garrett's control shattered. She saw it happen, saw the exact moment the chains broke. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands grabbing her face, his mouth crashing against hers with none of the careful gentleness he'd shown for 3 months. This kiss was hunger, need, years of denial breaking like a dam. His calloused fingers dug into her hair, tilting her head back, and he kissed her like he was trying to consume her, to merge their souls through touch alone. Nora kissed him back just as fiercely, her fingers digging into his shoulders, meeting his intensity with her own. She wasn't afraid. She was finally getting the real man instead of the ghost. Her nails scraped against the fabric of his shirt, and she felt him shudder against her. When Garrett pulled back, his breathing was ragged. His hands still framed her face, trembling against her skin. You sure about this? His voice was barely recognizable, rough, desperate, stripped of all pretense. Because if I stop holding back, if I let you see what I've really been feeling, there's no going back. I can't, he swallowed hard. I can't put this back in the box, Nora. Once I let it out, once I let myself need you the way I've been dying to need you, I won't be able to stop. The giant mail-order bride looked into her husband's eyes and saw the truth there. The rancher wasn't exaggerating. He'd been holding himself on such a tight leash for so long that letting go meant letting go of everything. It meant risking the kind of love that could destroy them both if it went wrong. The kind of love that demands everything and leaves no room for walls or safety or careful distance. I'm sure. Nora's voice was steady as stone. Her hands moved to his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palms. Make it harder, Garrett. Give me all of it. Let me decide if I can handle the man I married. She pressed closer, feeling the full length of his body against hers. I didn't cross 1,000 miles to love half a man. I came here to build something real. So stop protecting me and start trusting me. The rancher's eyes searched hers one more time, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that she didn't understand what she was asking. But all he saw was strength, determination, love that matched his own intensity. This woman, this magnificent, fierce, impossible woman, wasn't backing down. She was demanding he meet her halfway. No, she was demanding he meet her all the way. Garrett nodded slowly, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a promise and a warning wrapped together. Then God help us both. His hands moved to her waist, lifting her onto the kitchen table with a strength that made her gasp. Dishes clattered. The lamp rocked but didn't fall. Because I've been holding back for 3 months, Nora. Holding back everything I wanted to say, everything I wanted to do, everything I wanted to feel. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. And now you're going to get all of it. The giant mail-order bride felt a shiver run through her entire body, not from fear, but from anticipation. From the realization that she'd just unlocked something in her husband that had been buried for 9 years. Something powerful and raw and completely honest. Good, she whispered, and pulled him closer. It's about damn time. Thunder cracked overhead like a gunshot, and the rancher's hands tightened on his wife's waist. Garrett pulled Nora closer, his forehead pressed against hers, their breath mingling in the narrow space between them. The kitchen table creaked beneath her weight. And outside, the storm unleashed itself on the Wyoming ranch with a fury that matched what was breaking loose inside these walls. I need to tell you something, Garrett said, his voice rough. Before I... He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. That last night with Sarah, before the cattle drive, she asked me not to go. Begged me, actually. Said she had a bad feeling. His jaw clenched. But I went anyway. Told her we needed the money. That the ranch came first, and I was angry at her for being weak, for always being sick, for not being strong enough to... His voice broke. God forgive me. I resented my own wife for not being more like you. Nora's hands moved to his face, forcing him to keep looking at her. Garrett, I thought about you before you even existed, he continued, the words tumbling out now like he couldn't stop them. Not you specifically, but someone like you. Someone who could match me. Someone who wouldn't break. Tears slid down his weathered cheeks. And then Sarah died, and I knew it was punishment. Knew God was showing me what happens when a man like me tries to love. The giant mail-order bride felt her own tears coming. Not from sadness, but from finally understanding the weight her husband had been carrying. The rancher hadn't just been grieving his wife. He'd been punishing himself for not loving her the right way. For wanting something she couldn't give, for being relieved when she was gone, even as it destroyed him. Listen to me, Nora said firmly. Sarah's death wasn't punishment for wanting a partner instead of a porcelain doll. It was cholera. It was bad timing. It was the frontier being what it is, hard and cruel and unfair. She wiped his tears with her thumbs. And you're allowed to want what you want, Garrett. You're allowed to need someone strong. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you human. But I failed her. Maybe you weren't right for each other. Maybe she needed someone gentle, and you needed someone fierce. That's not evil, it's just truth. Nora's voice softened. And she's gone, Garrett. But I'm here, and I'm not her, and I'm not going to break. And you need to stop punishing us both for something that happened 9 years ago. The rancher stared at his wife like she'd just offered him salvation he didn't deserve. His hands trembled against her waist, and she could feel the war happening inside him, between the guilt that had defined him for nearly a decade and the desperate need to finally let it go. I don't know how to do this, Garrett whispered. How to love you without destroying you. Then we'll figure it out together. Nora pulled him into a kiss. Slower this time, but no less intense. Starting right now. No more ghosts. No more guilt. Just you and me, and the truth between us. The rancher nodded against her lips, and when he kissed her again, something had shifted. The desperation was still there, but underneath it was something new. Something that felt like permission, like forgiveness. Like maybe, just maybe, he could have this without the world ending. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, two people who'd been living half-lives finally started learning how to be whole. The lamp flickered as Garrett lifted Nora from the kitchen table, her legs wrapping around his waist instinctively. He carried her through the darkened house toward their bedroom, and for the first time in 3 months, it felt like their bedroom instead of his room where she happened to sleep. The rancher's hands gripped her thighs with the possessiveness he'd never allowed himself before, and the giant mail-order bride could feel the difference. This wasn't careful, Garrett. This wasn't the man who touched her like she might disappear. This was the husband she'd been demanding to meet. He kicked the bedroom door open, and lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the sparse room in stark white light. The bed they'd shared so many nights while keeping oceans between them. The dresser where she kept her few possessions. The mirror that had reflected her tears more times than she could count. Garrett set her down beside the bed, and his hands moved to finish unbuttoning her dress with a deliberateness that made her breath catch. "I want to see all of you," he said, his voice low. "Not just your body. I want to see who you really are, what you're really feeling. No more hiding for either of us." Nora's dress fell to the floor, and she stood before him in just her chemise and petticoats. But instead of feeling vulnerable, she felt powerful. The giant mail-order bride had spent her whole life being told she was too tall, too strong, too much. Her mother had despaired of ever finding her a husband. The scandal in Boston had confirmed everyone's worst assumptions about women who didn't fit the mold, but the way Garrett looked at her now, like she was everything he'd ever wanted and been too afraid to ask. For it made her feel beautiful for the first time in her life. "Your turn," she said, reaching for his shirt buttons. Her fingers worked quickly, revealing the scarred chest beneath. Battle wounds from the war. A burn from a branding iron. The physical map of a hard life lived without softness. She traced one particularly nasty scar that ran from his collarbone to his ribs. "Tell me about this one." "Shrapnel. Battle of Stones River." His hands covered hers. "I don't want to talk about war right now, Nora." "Then what do you want to talk about?" "This." He pulled her against him, skin to skin, and the contact made them both gasp. "I want to talk about how I've been dying every night lying next to you and not being able to touch you the way I needed to. How I'd wait until you were asleep just so I could hold you without having to explain why my hands were shaking." His voice dropped to a whisper. "How many times I almost broke, almost said to hell with protecting you and just took what I wanted." The giant mail-order bride felt heat flood through her. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was a coward." Garrett's hands moved up her back, pulling her impossibly closer. "Because I convinced myself that holding back was noble when really it was just fear." He kissed her neck, her jaw, her lips. "But I'm done being afraid, Nora. You asked for all of me, and I'm going to give it to you, even if it terrifies me, even if I don't know how this ends." They fell onto the bed together, and this time there was no hesitation, no careful distance. The rancher kissed his wife like he was trying to memorize the taste of her, and the giant mail-order bride met him with equal hunger. 3 months of denial and longing poured out in touches that were almost desperate, almost rough, but never cruel. This was passion without pretense, need without shame. "Tell me what you want," Garrett breathed against her ear. "Tell me what you need from me." "Honesty," Nora gasped, as his hands explored places he'd only touched tentatively before. "I need you to stop performing and start feeling. Stop trying to be what you think I need and just be who you are." The rancher pulled back to look at her, and in his eyes she saw everything he'd been hiding. The intensity, the hunger, the depth of feeling that had scared him so badly he'd tried to bury it. "What if who I am is too much? Then I'll tell you." She pulled him back down. "That's what partners do, Garrett. They trust each other enough to be honest. They don't decide alone what the other person can handle." Something broke loose in the rancher then, some final chain that had been holding him back. He made love to his wife with an honesty that left them both shaking, both gasping, both finally connected in the way they should have been from the start. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together with the storm still raging outside, Garrett did something he hadn't done since the war. He cried, not silent tears this time, but deep wrenching sobs that shook his entire frame. 9 years of grief and guilt and loneliness pouring out while Nora held him, her own tears mixing with his. The giant mail-order bride wrapped her strong arms around her broken husband and let him fall apart, because that's what he needed. Not someone to fix him, someone to hold him while he finally felt everything he'd been running from. "I'm sorry," Garrett choked out. "I'm so sorry, don't." Nora's voice was fierce. "Don't you dare apologize for being human, for feeling things, for trusting me enough to let me see you like this." She kissed his forehead, his wet cheeks, his trembling lips. "This is what I wanted, Garrett. Not the rancher who has everything together. The man who's brave enough to fall apart." Dawn broke over the Wyoming ranch in shades of gold and pink, the storm having passed in the night. Garrett woke first, and for a moment he lay perfectly still, afraid to move. Afraid this was a dream. Afraid he'd open his eyes and find himself back in the half-life he'd been living for 9 years. But then Nora shifted against him, her copper hair spilling across his chest, her breathing deep and even, and he knew it was real. The giant mail-order bride was still here. Still his. And he'd finally let her in. Garrett's hand moved to stroke her hair, the gesture tender in a way he'd never allowed himself before. Last night had cracked something open inside him, something he'd thought was dead. He'd cried in her arms like a child, told her things he'd never told anyone, showed her the parts of himself he'd been convinced would drive her away. And she'd stayed, more than stayed. She'd held him through it all, and told him he was brave for breaking. Nora's eyes opened slowly, focusing on his face. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then a smile curved her lips, small at first, then growing wider. "You're still here," she said softly. "Where else would I be?" "I don't know." "The barn, maybe. Running away from what happened last night?" Her hand rested on his chest, over his heart. "You have a habit of doing that." The rancher covered her hand with his. "Not anymore." His voice was rough from sleep and emotion. "I'm done running, Nora, from you, from this, from whatever the hell we're building here." The giant mail-order bride pushed herself up on one elbow, studying his face. "You mean that?" "Because I need you to mean it, Garrett. I can't do last night over and over. I can't keep tearing down walls just to watch you build them back up. I mean it." He sat up, pulling her with him, so they faced each other in the early morning light. "Last night you said something that I can't stop thinking about. You said I was brave for breaking, and I realized I've spent 9 years thinking strength meant never falling apart, never needing anyone, never admitting I couldn't handle something alone." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But you're the strongest person I know, and you asked me for help last night. Asked me to meet you halfway. And that took more courage than anything I did in the war." Nora's eyes glistened with fresh tears. "Garrett, let me finish." He took a shaky breath. "I want to take you to the hillside today, to Sarah and James. I want you to meet them properly. Not as the woman I'm replacing them with, but as my wife. As the person I'm choosing to build a life with." His voice cracked. "And I want to tell them I'm sorry for holding on so long. Sorry for using their memory as an excuse to stay dead inside. And that I'm going to try to do better. To be better. For you." The giant mail-order bride threw her arms around the rancher's neck, holding him so tight he could barely breathe. "Yes," she whispered against his shoulder. "Yes, I want that." She pulled back to look at him. "And I want to tell you something, too, about Boston. About why I really left." Garrett tensed slightly. "You told me. The scandal, that's not all of it." Nora took a breath. "The man who attacked me, my employer, he told everyone I seduced him, that I was trying to trap him into marriage. And my own mother believed him. My own father threw me out." Her voice shook. "I didn't just leave Boston because I was ruined. I left because my family chose his lie over my truth. And I've been terrified that one day you'd look at me and see what they saw. A woman who's too much, too tall, too strong, too difficult to love." The rancher's hands framed her face. "You listen to me, Nora Dalton. I see a woman who crossed 1,000 miles alone to start over, who works harder than most men I know, who was strong enough to demand I stop hiding and brave enough to hold me when I fell apart." His forehead pressed against hers. "And if your family couldn't see how magnificent you are, that's their loss, because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I almost lost you, because I was too scared to admit it." They sat like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing together, letting the weight of everything they'd been through settle between them. Not as a burden this time, but as a foundation. The hard things they'd survived, the walls they'd torn down, the truth they'd finally had the courage to speak. "So what now?" Nora asked quietly. "Where do we go from here?" Garrett smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. "Now we get dressed, have breakfast, go talk to my first family, so I can finally let them rest in peace." He kissed her softly. "And then we start building our life, the real one. No more half measures, no more holding back, just you and me and whatever comes next." "It won't be easy," Nora warned. "We're both stubborn, both damaged, both used to doing things our own way." "Good." The rancher pulled her to her feet. "Easy was never going to work for us anyway. We need hard, we need real, we need something worth fighting for." The giant mail-order bride laughed, and the sound filled the bedroom like sunlight. "Then let's make it harder, every single day, for the rest of our lives." They dressed together, stealing kisses and touches that felt different now, lighter, freer. The weight of secrets and shame lifted. When they walked out of the bedroom hand in hand, Tomas was already in the kitchen making coffee. The old ranch hand took one look at them and grinned. "About time, boss," he said in his accented English. "About damn time," Garrett laughed, actually laughed, and pulled Nora closer. "Yeah, it is." They ate breakfast together, the three of them, talking about the storm damage and what needed fixing. But there was something new in the conversation, a lightness, a sense that this house was finally a home, instead of just a place where broken people hid from their pain. After breakfast, Garrett and Nora walked up the hillside to the 2 wooden crosses. The morning sun was warm on their backs, and wildflowers had started to bloom after the storm. Nora hung back slightly, letting the rancher approach first. "Sarah, James." Garrett's voice was steady. "I want you to meet Nora, my wife." He reached back, and the giant mail-order bride took his hand, stepping up beside him. "She's nothing like you, Sarah. She's strong where you were gentle, fierce where you were soft. And I love her. Not as a replacement for you, but as herself. As the partner I needed, but was too scared to find." His throat tightened, but he pushed through. "I'm sorry I held on so long. Sorry I used your memory as armor against feeling anything real. But I'm letting go now. I'm choosing to live. And I hope, wherever you are, you're okay with that. I hope you've found peace. Because I finally have." Nora squeezed his hand, her own tears falling freely. "I'll take care of him," she said to the graves. "I promise. And I'll never try to erase you. You'll always be part of his story. Part of our story." They stood there together as the sun climbed higher, and slowly Garrett felt the last of the weight lift from his shoulders. The guilt, the shame, the fear. It didn't disappear completely. He knew it never would. But it became manageable, became something he could carry without it crushing him, because he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. When they walked back down the hillside, the rancher pulled his wife close and kissed her in the bright morning light. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on me, for demanding better, for being brave enough to make it harder." "Always," Nora said and smiled. "That's what love is, Garrett. Choosing the hard thing. Together, every single day, and they did. For the rest of their lives, they chose each other. Through drought and prosperity, through loss and joy, through all the hard, beautiful, messy reality of building something real. The rancher and his giant mail-order bride became partners in every sense of the word, equals who challenged each other, held each other and loved each other with an honesty that made them both stronger. And on quiet mornings, when Garrett woke before dawn and watched his wife sleeping beside him, he whispered the same prayer of gratitude. For the woman brave enough to demand he stop hiding, for the love that had saved them both, for the life they'd built from broken pieces. It was harder than he'd ever imagined, and it was worth every single moment. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? We love hearing from our community around the world. Drop your location and the time, and let's build something beautiful together. Just like Garrett and Nora did. One brave choice at a time.